Welcome back to Purrfect Takes. I'm your host, Stephen Patton, joined as always by my co-host and dear friend, Jake LaQuire. And today we are heading out west. So we're just kind of navigating through this compass, how we feel like we started in the north, moved to the east, now we're in the west. We'll wrap up with the south on Thursday. But I think what's interesting when we talk about this division, it is filled with like Hall of Fame caliber coaches. And I think a lot of these guys are past their prime, but when you're talking about guys like Andy Reid and Sean Payton and Pete Carroll and Jim Harbaugh, you start talking about some of the most respected individuals and some of the greatest minds, not only in the modern era, but you could argue all time. So I think from that perspective, it is very unique to kind of see this collection or array of decorated coaches. What are your initial thoughts on the AFC West before we kind of dig into the details?
Well, you mentioned it. It's going to be a gauntlet from the top down, right? Before this season, or even 2 years ago, it was okay, it's just Mahomes and Andy Reid, right? Herbert was there. He had been to a playoff game, but nothing good really came of that. And so you bring in Sean Payton a couple years ago, bring in Jim Harbaugh. Bo Nix performed well, I think, performed adequately as a rookie starter. And then this past offseason, you bring in Pete Carroll, Geno Smith, from top to bottom, the head coaches, the QBs in this division, probably the most competitive out of all 8 divisions. And you mentioned it with the coaches. Not only are they some of the greatest and most creative minds in NFL history, all of them are some of the most winning coaches by win percentage, and all of them are champions, right? Three of the coaches, Sean Payton, Pete Carroll, and Andy Reid, obviously have Super Bowl rings. Only Reid with this current franchise. And then Jim Harbaugh, as well as Pete Carroll, have college national championships. So all of them know what it takes to get it done. And we saw last year, three of the teams got to the playoffs. I wonder how many are going to make it this year.
I think the AFC West has a good chance of still sending two or three teams to the postseason. I don't think that number is really going to change. It might be about reshuffling and how we view some of these teams at the end of the year, but I really think what we're arguing about is really like 2 and 3. I know you're arguing for one of those teams to be one this year, but both of us can agree the Las Vegas Raiders come in at number 4. And it's not because they didn't improve a lot this offseason. It's just because they have so many holes on their roster. And what they did, I just don't think is going to be enough. So obviously, they trade for Geno Smith. They signed Pete Carroll, who took kind of a year off and was more of an assistant with the Seahawks last year. And then you kind of do some reshuffling on the offensive side of the ball because the defense wasn't necessarily the problem last year, but I think that's going to be their Achilles heel this year. Decent offensive line. Ashton Genty was your first round pick. Brock Bowers was an All Pro last year. A lot of pluses that go off of. It's just when you look at the division they play in, the conference they play in, you start realizing that is it enough to win 9, 10 games at the end of the year? And I don't see it.
Yeah, it's like climbing Mount Everest. If you want to compare that to get into the Super Bowl, if you make it to the base camp, right, which is a multiple day climb, you still have multiple days to go from there, and you have to climb it multiple times. I saw a documentary on Mount Everest like a week ago, so I'm talking about this. But you have to go up, come back down, go up again, come back down before they let you get there. That's kind of the stage that the Raiders are at, right? It's not that they haven't improved, like you're saying, they just have to improve so much to even meet the Chiefs in their own division. But like you said, from the top down, Tom Brady is a minority owner now, so at least some championship DNA was injected from the top. They bring in somebody that he's familiar with, and John Spytek from Tampa Bay, I believe. But then, yeah, Geno Smith, Pete Carroll, Ashton Genty, you already have Brock Bowers. They secured Colton Miller, the left tackle. He got an extension about a month ago. But it's going to be the defense, like you're saying, which was admirable last season under Patrick Graham. I think he's one of the more underrated defensive coordinators in the league because he's always dealt not a great hand in terms of talent, but he always seems to make something shake. I think that's going to be, like you're saying, the issue this year, especially because they cut Christian Wilkins about a month ago from the team with a contract injury dispute. So that defensive line is going to be Max Crosby, who got freshly extended, Malcolm Kuntz, who's on a 1 year kind of prove it deal that he can be healthy, and then a bunch of shuffling pieces. including new linebackers like Derek White and Landon Roberts. Eric Stokes is a new corner, former first round pick. Jeremy Chin is on the Raiders now. I think one of our special teamers, Lonnie Johnson, is one of their special teamers now as well. I have Jacorian Bennett here on my notes, and he recently was waived. So there's even more shuffling going on that defense. I don't know how this defense is going to be able to keep up with even the quarterbacks and the teams in their division.
It's not looking great on that side. I think what you hang your hat on is you have a Max Crosby on that side. You have Patrick Graham, who has gotten the most out of the secondary while he's been there. So you're hoping to have kind of I would say like your defensive expectations going in with the roster that you have is probably like somewhere in the range of like 16 to 24. Like you want to kind of be like average to below average. And if you're able to do that, and this offense is able to be an above average unit, that's where you start hovering around 500. You're scrappy, you're competitive. And I think that's ultimately what we see this team as, like a 6-7 win team that pushes everybody that they play. They might win a few games that they weren't really expected to win, and they might lose a couple that they really should have lost. And that's just the nature of, I think, this team and how they're set up. Yeah, I think that's all we have to say about the Raiders. I don't think
Well,
both either of us have them like making the playoffs. But yeah, I'm curious if there's anything else you have as we're wrapping up this part.
I think that they're the clear fourth team, right? Outside of the other three. You could even shuffle the other three. But when it comes to the players that we want to keep an eye on this season, that you want to buy and sell from a watcher perspective, from a fantasy perspective, I think it starts with Ashton Genty, right? Their number 6 overall pick, highest running back since, do you know?
Saquon? No, no, no. Leonard? No, Leonard Fournette. Yep.
Yes.
No,
Or
no.
no, it would
It,
be Saquon,
Saquon. It
and
was
then
Saquon. It's
the
Saquon.
year
Yeah,
before that
Leonard.
was, Fournette and then Ezekiel Elliott. There was a little
Yeah.
run there of early QB, or excuse me, running backs that kinda died, came back with, Bijan Robinson, and now it's here again with Genty. Genty showed last year that even against tough, opponents like Penn State, Oregon, he was able to run the ball when the defensive line overwhelmed him. So for an O-line that was around 22nd last year in run block win rate, I think he's still gonna be able to succeed given that we know he can do that. The other key piece there for me is Chip Kelly, the new offensive coordinator, former Philadelphia Eagles head coach. He really brought the RPO to the National Football League. If he can do some creative stuff coming off of a championship season in which he did some creative stuff with running backs at Ohio State, I think we can see a lot of Ashton Genty, a lot of raw stats getting into the end zone, a lot of touches regardless this season.
You're absolutely correct, and it's funny. I wanted to skip right over the Raiders, which is a play on kind of like Pirates and whatnot, and X factors. X marks the spot, and Ashton
Mhm.
Genty is that. He is the X factor on this offense, aside from Brock Bowers. And what's interesting, I haven't completely finished this article, but it's in the works. So it'll get published in the next week or two. But it is talking about Ashton Genty. It is talking about some of those other highly drafted, high profile running backs. And what's interesting, Next Gen Stats, going back to 2014, has prospect grades for literally everyone who's come out of college from 2014 till now. And when you look at the prospect grades and the fantasy points per game, and I'm referring to half PPR in this case, you see almost a linear correlation between that prospect grade and points per game. And so at the top, Ezekiel Elliott, Saquon Barkley, guys who averaged over 20 points per game as rookies. They had prospect grades over 7.2. Ashton Genty's this past year was 7.15, a little bit above Leonard Fournette, who averaged 16 points per game his rookie year. So that's, I think, the range when you talk about Ashton Genty, and he is a true RB1 this year. I don't see 5 running backs better than him in this class if we're looking at it just from a fantasy outlook. And he is a guy that is going to be fed the ball. Chip Kelly was top 10 in carries every single year. I think he was in the league with like the Eagles and the 49ers. Like, this is a guy that wanted to kind of run the ball, and there's nobody else competing with Genty for these carries. So you factor that in, you factor in some of the checkdowns and how he's going to be involved in the passing game with a veteran quarterback. It's just a lot to love about a prospect that's hitting the ground running.
I couldn't agree more. And I think the last thing I'll say about the Raiders offense is that we barely talked about Geno Smith, who I would say over the past couple years since he's been the starter with Seattle, has been one of, if not the best deep ball placement thrower in the league. And they don't have a ton of incumbent deep ball talent on that roster. We know how good Brock Bowers is, but he's not gassing safeties for 30 yards on go routes. The guy I want to hone in on is Dante Thornton, the rookie from Tennessee. That was like his specialty last year. And if they had a better QB, he probably wins the Bolitnikoff Award. I think that's a match made in heaven if they're able to unlock it. They targeted Thornton quite a bit in the first preseason game the Raiders did against, funnily enough, the Seahawks. But I think if he can be like a 6 foot plus version of what Trey Tucker is, who was like a sneaky player for the Raiders last year, I think that's kind of a deep buy in like a heavy PPR league, like in your later rounds. Dante Thornton Jr. from Tennessee could be a guy.
He could be. He's just a boomer bust guy. It's like the Jamison Williams train. I think over the past couple years, it's like when he's getting touches, he's getting those targets, and they're hitting. It's going to look great. He's going to have weeks where he's probably over 20 points, but then there are going to be weeks where you're not able to hit on those. That these deep cover two shells, cover four shells are just mitigating those deep passes to where he's not as effective. And so I think that's where a hold on, is it a Jack Beck? Am I saying that's right?
It's
Or is it
Jack
Bash?
Besh. Jack Besh.
Besh. There we go. We were going over this pre-recording, and it's like I messed it up anyway. So Jack Besh, I think he's a good possession receiver. You pair him with guys like Michael Mayer, Brock Bowers. It just guys that are going to catch the ball, do their job, and keep the chains moving. And you got to love that in a Chip Kelly offense that's going to be innovative, that's going to lean on the run game. Again, fun team to watch. It's just there's too many holes on this roster to go. They're a playoff team.
Yeah, ultimately, I think the defense is going to hold them back. The next team, or the team that finished third last year, I don't think we have any questions about their defense holding them back. They already had one of the best defenses in the league per EPA per play, actually first in defensive EPA per play, first in defensive success rate. They allowed the third fewest points per game at just over 18 points per game. And they got better, or at least on paper, they got better. They added Dre Greenlaw, they added Talanoa Hufanga, and then drafted Jade Barron with their first round pick. It's the Denver Broncos. Like, I know defensive regression is always going to happen, but continually adding to a strong defense, getting targeted pieces, I'll say, on offense. I think this team has very few holes outside of one kind of glaring non elite spot on the team. And if everything coalesces, this could be a team we talk about in the postseason.
Yeah, no, and what's hard is like they're always going to like do this in the off season where it's like you have so much like hope that they're going to make a run, that they're going to build towards a championship, and you can't take anything away from um hold on, Jim Harbaugh. I don't know why I'm blanking, but more the aspect that the Chargers are going to charger. You just lost Rashawn Slater. I The defense, you lose Puna Ford, you lose some of those guys, Joey Boza, whatnot, and it just they made it work last year, and I don't know if they're going to be able to keep it together as well this year. What are your concerns mainly for this team? Do you think Jesse Minter can repeat in pretty much outputting a top five defense last year with no bodies? And then on the offensive side, do you think they take a step that some of the younger wide receivers that they've drafted are going to be able to step up around Lad McConkey? And that I think that's where I'm left with this team. If you want to see them take a jump from being a borderline top 12 team into being a team that's going to make the playoffs, make a playoff push, that's what they're going to have to do.
My little intro there, and I don't know if I cut out for you or not, was about the Denver Broncos, actually, who were the third place team in last year's AFC West. It's been a long day for you. You're saying it was a bit of a long night yesterday. You had some car trouble. But if we're gonna go with the Chargers
No, no, no,
direction,
no. That's why I was stalling. Is I had heard the third place finish team, and I had just zoned out, and I was like, I just started going on the Chargers rant. So
well,
maybe I'll go back and cut that out. Whoever's gonna listen to this is gonna hear you do that spiel, hear me kind of like ramble and ooh and like trying to find a footing. And I should have just like backed off and like made a generic comment and let you jump back in. But let's talk about the Denver Broncos. Let's scratch what I said. Bo Nix going into
that
year
that was
two.
Bo Nix was the glaring non-elite spot that I was referring to on the Broncos. I think at
Yeah.
every other position, maybe not receiver, you couldn't say the receiver core is elite, but the running back room, we know that they targeted RJ Harvey, right? They traded back multiple times in round 2 to get him. They said he was 5th on the first unofficial depth chart. He had like every single carry in their preseason game. So that was a little bit of a troll job there from the Broncos. Their O-line, excellent O-line, all of them are under contract. They had Evan Ingram, who goes to a stable of tight ends that Sean Payton liked to use last year. He can be like a featured tight end now. The offense knows what it's doing, and Sean Payton is creative. The defensive side of the ball, like I was referring to, was probably the best in the league last year, and on paper got better. So I'm trying to find the flaw outside of this team, other than maybe Bo Nix not hitting elite level status that we think that Jaden Daniels has already hit, that we think guys like Drake May and possibly even Caleb Williams have the physical tools to hit. Is that the only thing you see holding this team back this year from a deeper playoff run than last year?
Who, and I want to ask this question before I do my spiel on the Broncos. Like, who is their elite playmaker on offense? And if you want to say it's Cortland Sutton, then my next question is, where does he rank among wide receivers in the NFL? Because I think when we talk about that offense, yes, there's a lot to like with Evan Ingram, RJ Harvey, those additions. But who is that guy that just makes a complete difference on that side of the ball?
I don't think they have one. That was kind of my point, that it's a good collection. They all fit into the mold of a Sean Payton offense, but none of them are the Michael Thomas during his heyday. None of them
Jimmy
are
Graham, Marcus
Jimmy.
Colston.
Certainly Jimmy. I was going to say Marcus Colston is probably the closest comparator to like a guy like Cortland Sutton, right? So I don't think they have one yet. I think they hope that a guy like RJ Harvey can be a real bell cow back and shine in a Sean Payton system that loves to use their running backs. But that's kind of the other thing outside of the QB. What I will say is they were able to make it work last year, and I think that if they're able to make it work with some new pieces this year, I think it'll still be a very potent offense because we know that Sean Payton can get the most out of his players.
He definitely can. He's one of the most well regarded coaches. Comes from the Bill Parcells tree, and is just excellent. I mean, like when you look at what he did with the Saints to now what he's done with the Broncos, he is able to marry the run and the pass so well, and like he's just the no nonsense guy. And I think you see aspects of that. And obviously, the two didn't work directly together, but the ties and overlaps are there is you see, I think, like a mini him and Ben Johnson, just a guy that no nonsense, knows his X's and O's, and brings an innovation and creativity to the game that is very much needed as the fans that are consuming football. Going into kind of the offense and what I think is going to hold this team back is you saw it with the Eagles a couple years ago. I even saw it with the Bills early on with Josh Allen. Is they didn't have that number one wide receiver. And if you're unsure about this guy taking a step of being that guy that can go from average to maybe an elite quarterback, like you got to give him a running mate. Like you got to have that duo. And that's what I think is missing. Obviously, Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, they've been able to do it with kind of like that grouping, but they have athletic traits that I don't think Bo Nix has at his disposal. He's really good with his legs. Obviously, he has a great pressure to sack ratio and operates phenomenally outside of the pocket. But it's just I have to see him take that step or somebody on this offense to explode and just be an elite playmaker for me to think that this is a team that's going to win more than like 10 games. And that's kind of where I'm at. I think the defense is great, but I don't know if the defense is like the 2015 Broncos or the 2013 Seattle Seahawks. Like there's a lot of pieces to like. You obviously have a lot of Pro Bowl, all pro talent, but how is it all going to mesh together? Is everybody going to stay healthy? Like these are questions that I have going into it. Like obviously everything looks great on paper, but when you have a Dre Greenlaw and a Talahu or Talohays Hufunga, like those kind of players, because of how vicious they play, they have an injury history. So who's to say that they aren't going to end up injured or missing a few games down a key stretch where you need to win a couple games to get into the playoffs or win your division or whatever it is that is in front of them. And that's my reservation when we talk about the Denver Broncos. There's a lot to like about this team. They are on the upwards trajectory. They are one of the most complete teams across the NFL. It's like talking about them, the Bills and the Packers. Who are your elite playmakers that are just game changers? And outside of Patrick Surtain and maybe one of their edge rushers, I just well, I'll take that back. It's either like Zach Allen or like one of their edge rushers. Like those kind of guys, where are those on the roster? And if you don't have those, I think it's hard to elevate into this tier of being a Super Bowl contender.
I couldn't agree more with the Packers and Bills comparisons because I think of those rosters as a whole, kind of in the same vein. I think the Broncos are probably a better roster, but the
I
Bills
agree.
have a guy like Josh Allen, right, who just erases so many of the concerns that you have with a receiving cast like the Broncos have. In terms of like getting into buying and selling and X factors and things like that, I'm pretty sold like on everybody on defense. Even if you have guys like Dre Greenlaw and Talanoa Hufanga miss time, they didn't have them last year, and they were still the best defense in the league. Then they added those guys. They add Jade Barron, so I'm not super concerned there. My X factor is going to be the new additions R.J. Harvey and Evan Ingram because we know that's who Sean Payton builds his offense around. He's one of the few guys that builds it inside out, not outside in. And so if Harvey can put up big numbers, if he can be like a productive bell cow guy, and if Ingram, I know Evan Ingram's past his, maybe not past his prime, but he's not a top 3 to 5 tight end, we'll say. But if he can have top 5 tight end volume and top 5 tight end like raw yardage and stuff like that, be a go-to guy in the end zone, that's where I think the offense can take its, excuse me, take its next step.
Yeah. And you want to see that. It's just whether or not it actually happens. And sometimes like progression isn't linear.
Mhm.
You come onto the scene, you're able to do some things that nobody's seen before because nobody had the Sean Payton and Bo Nix combination. Like people obviously were familiar with what Payton wanted to do, but how is that going to look with a young quarterback? And obviously he got comfortable within the system, but I outside of a couple deep shots, it's that intermediate accuracy, like challenging that level of the field that I think Bo Nix needs to take a step. They drafted a guy in Pat Bryant who could be that Marcus Colston type role. Cortland Sutton isn't a small receiver by any means. They love their tight ends. So there's an ability to kind of work that area. And honest to goodness, that's probably what I want to see Bo Nix grow the most in is hitting those intermediate throws. Because early on in his rookie year, he was airmailing a couple of those and not on target. And if you want to be able to be a quarterback in this league, you can't just dump down and then throw a couple deep balls. Like a couple guys make that work, but that's we're always talking about those guys as like the fringe bubble guys of like, would you want them to be your franchise quarterback? Is this a guy you want to pay big money to? And that's I think a conversation Bo Nix doesn't want to be in. So again, for his sake, I'd like to see growth in that area.
I can't remember if it was against the Saints or against the Bears. I think it was one of those 2 teams, but it
The
was
Saints,
like
yeah.
it was you know exactly what I'm referring. I think it was a Thursday night game where it's like tight end corner and a post, and he perfectly places it between 2 wide open receivers. Like they didn't have a defender within 15 yards of him, perfectly in between. You like to see that improve for them to have a chance to win in the playoffs because I think neither of us have a doubt that they can stack up regular season wins just because their defense can dominate, right? Getting to a team that you wanted to talk about earlier, the Los Angeles Chargers, who Jim Harbaugh, we know, has won at the college level. Jesse Mentor won with him at Michigan. We can start with the defense because that's kind of where we started. This is another really, really good defense, or it was last year, we can say. Sixth in both EPA per play and success rate. They actually allowed the fewest points per game at 17.7 points per game. And it was kind of with a ragtag group, right? A lot of late round rookies were relied upon, a lot of depth chart pieces were relied upon. And this year, it's kind of the same, right? They lose Joey Bosa, who I think is past his star pedigree, right? They lose Christian Fulton. That's what I'm thinking of to the Kansas City Chiefs and bring in Dante Jackson to replace him. We know how that goes. And Deshaun Hand, who's like a rotational guy, former Alabama player. I think the Lions ended up drafting him like 5 or 6 years ago. Point being, it's a lot of the same group. Jesse Minter is going to have to get more out of that group this year if he wants them to be a competitive defense still. With defensive regression being what it is, do you think they're going to continue to be a top 5 to 8 defense, or are they going to move back a little bit?
I think it's hard to expect that level of excellence because I think some of the pieces that were there, like a Puna Ford, it's like who did you pick up to replace that? Like you can't drop back so many guys now because you don't have a space eater in the middle. And so like I don't know if that necessarily fixes, and we'll talk about the Rams when we get to the NFC West, their run stopping issues.
Well,
But
and
when you
to interject just real quick, the reason that you don't worry about that with a team like the Broncos is the star power, right? They have Patrick Surtain, they have Nick Bonito, who had like 50 or not 15, excuse me, like 12 sacks last year. Zach Allen was now pro. This team doesn't have those players, right?
and when you don't have that star talent, like you have an aging Khalil Mack, Derwin James is probably the biggest name on that back end. Like there are a couple guys there that it's like these are quality starters. They know how to play their roles. Some of those cornerbacks can play well together. I I just don't know if you're going to see like a top 5 unit. Like to me, this could still be top 10, top 15. But a lot of people have been making a big to do about the offense, and it's like the offense from like DVOA, EPA standpoint was average, close to top 12 in a lot of metrics across the board. And so because of that, it's like I could see them taking a step. Like, yes, you lose Slater, who is one of the better left tackles in the league, but you're plugging in Joe Alt, who like prototypically is built to play that position. And they just slotted him over to the right tackle last year because they had an abundance of riches. So it's like in that case and standpoint, I think you can still have a competent offensive line. You added Omario Hampton to show your dedication to wanting to run the ball. You're hoping a guy like Trey Harris can be complementary to Lad McConkey and get some groove to where you're not just top 12, you're like top 10. And I think if they can take that step offensively while the defense regresses, you're still right where you were last year, which is a playoff team. But again, I don't think they did enough this year to get over the hump of where they were last year. I thought they overperformed last year. And now it's like, okay, can you be competitive in a wild card game? Can you pull off a wild card game? But I don't see this team making a deep playoff run. I don't think they have the talent to go win a Super Bowl. And I don't think anybody is saying they do. It's just I think that's just the state of like everything in the AFC West seems pretty cut and dry. It seems like the Broncos and Chargers are pretty good teams that can make the playoffs, maybe win a game once they get there, but they're not championship caliber. The Raiders still a long way to go, probably not going to be in the playoffs with a deep AFC. And then are we just left with the Chiefs winning the division again? Like is this just the same old Patrick Mahomes, Andy Reid do their thing? Kind of mess around all year, somehow find a way to win 12, 13 games, and then and make the magical postseason run that they've always done.
We've been on kind of the same wavelength today outside of the that one transition there because I agree with you. I think that this offense, you hope it takes a step forward. Greg Roman's never going to have his QB throwing for 5,000 yards or something like that. So Herbert's not going to
Yeah.
be the like from a fantasy stand, he's not going to be a top 5 QB by any means, but you're right. They invest in the run game. Omarion Hampton they draft in the first round. They signed Najee Harris before like a July 4th mishap, so I think he's going to miss time. They bring in Mekhi Becton, who is a mauler he got his career like saved by Jeff Stoutland in the Eagles O line there, so he's going to help with the run game. Obviously, moving or losing Slater is rough, but you have Joe Alt, a top 5 pick, like you're talking about at the left tackle spot now. I am, however, concerned about the receiver room because as great as Lad McConkey was last year, Trey Harris has been dropping a lot of passes in camp. And this is a team that went out and signed Mike Williams in the offseason, who promptly retired after like a week or two of camp. Then they go and sign Keenan Allen like a week ago. So it's clear that they want more bodies in that room to help Lad McConkey. And I'm not sure if they're going to get it from the guys that they have. Trey Harris, to me, doing draft evals was the most perplexing prospect in the entire draft because when you're looking at the Ole Miss offense, you got to kind of apply the Lane Kiffin tax, and every single thing is schemed open. That's why I had questions about Jackson Dart as well. I don't know how he's going to fit in a Greg Roman style offense, especially when Lad McConkey's already going to be taking the majority of the targets. So for me, I'm a little bit concerned about the pass game. Luckily for them, Greg Roman cares more about the run game, and I think that improved. But to your point about them overperforming in year one, I couldn't agree more. I actually think that the Broncos are in better shape this year
Yes.
for like a postseason run, just based on how the team is built. But again, the Chargers have a guy named Justin Herbert who, despite all his postseason faults and things like that, is still a very good quarterback. He has all the tools that you need. So, in terms of X factors, and if anything could elevate them above the Broncos or even the the Chiefs, if the Chiefs are going to fall, it's going to be Justin Herbert.
He has to be the X factor. I think they have to find an identity in the run game because like as much as we want to talk about like Greg Roman and him wanting to lean there. It was that they didn't have a lot of production on that side. They weren't very efficient on that side. It's like, okay, if you can get better running the ball and Herbert can continue doing what he's doing, get a little bit more comfortable in this offense that forces him to hold on the ball a little bit longer than he's used to. I mean, he's going from like Joe Lombardi and Kellen Moore, which had, I think, some more quick passing elements into their offense than Greg Roman necessarily does. So I think as he gets more comfortable, you're going to see Herbert grow. But I'm also hoping like Omario Hampton helps out that running back room, because if you can get production from him and Najee Harris, I think that's a big upgrade to what was in that room last year. And obviously, I don't support the cap and draft capital in there, but that should be somewhere. Like if you're looking for the Chargers going in an upwards direction, those two additions seem to be the biggest indicator for that evolution rather than regression. So, Chiefs finally, Patrick Mahomes, Andy Reid coming off their second Super Bowl loss, and both losses have been like downright just like beatdowns. Usually issues with the offensive line have been the cause. They go out, they sign, I believe it was Dan Moore from the San Francisco 49ers. He played a couple games when Trent Williams was out last year. They draft Josh Simmons out of Ohio State, who is coming off of either like a pec or bicep injury. And then who else did they add? I feel like they shipped Joe Tooney out. They extended
They extend
their one guard.
Trey Smith.
Did they add anybody? I was trying to think if they added anybody else outside of those two left tackles, and I don't think they did. But I think they also feel comfortable about like the people in that room. Creed Humphrey, like you said, they locked up their one stud, and I'm blanking out on his name again. But their right guard, Trey Smith, and then they aren't so sure on their right tackle from what I've heard. They've been playing with some things with Jawan Taylor. It'll be interesting if they like Dan Moore better and he can play right tackle, and Josh Simmons is good right out of the gate. Like maybe you do something like that. But again, Andy Reid does some funky things down the stretch with the offensive line and tweaking that. So that I would not say is like going to be set in stone, locked in place week one. I think that's definitely going to be malleable as the season goes on.
For sure. The Josh Simmons pick, it was pick 32 actually, because they swapped with the Eagles.
Yeah.
Really good pick. I think people who watched his tape came away thinking that if everything's all clear, he could be the best left tackle in the class. And from all reports so far, he's all good medically. I think it was a knee with him, but it's all good now, so that's good. The guy from San Francisco, it's Jalen Moore. Dan Moore was the guy who went to the Titans.
Yeah, he was from the
two
Steelers. Yeah, I
two
knew I had them
Moores
wrong.
that got moved this offseason. For both of them got decent contracts as well. I think you saw reports about Jalen Moore taking right tackle snaps, and I've seen those as well. I think Jawan Taylor started camp on the PUP list. That might be why, as to Jalen Moore's taking those snaps. Maybe it's because they like Jalen Moore there. Who knows? Jawan Taylor is like a walking false start sometimes, so they may be taking the 5-yard penalty risk off the table with that. But as far as the rest of the offense goes, it's going to be more of the same, right? Creed Humphrey, Trey Smith are still there. Kingsley Suamatea is going to be the left guard, presumably the guy they drafted a couple years ago out of BYU. And the receiver room is going to be what it was last year. Xavier Worthy, Hollywood Brown, they re-sign. Rashee Rice, still don't know when he's getting on the field in regards to health and or suspension, but then still have Travis Kelce, Pacheco, and Patrick Mahomes. If you show me this offense without Mahomes, I'm not a huge fan of it, but I know that what Mahomes is able to do, his rapport with Travis Kelce, his ability to navigate maybe an untested offensive line group as far as the tackles go, I get a lot more comfortable. But then if you take it away, it's like, I'm not the biggest fan of Isaiah Pacheco. Xavier Worthy really showing down the stretch, but Rashee Rice might miss time. Hollywood Brown, not the greatest. Is Mahomes like carrying your perception of this offense? Or do you think as a whole, this offense is pretty close to top 10 like they were last year? They were 11th in EPA per play and 7th in success rate.
I think it's fair to say that over the past 2 years, really, it's hard to say 3 years because the
It's
first
since
year
Matt Nagy
after,
got there, if we're being real.
yeah, that too. But like they shipped Tyreek Hill out. Travis Kelce is still the best tight end in football. They were still able to do things offensively with him, with some of the other like pieces, because he truly was like an elite difference maker. And I think that held true mostly through 2023, but there was definitely a drop off this past year. And so I don't think you have like an elite playmaker on that offense. right now, and I think it's just because we don't know what Rashee Rice is going to look like after the injury and the suspension, and then we don't know what Xavier Worthy is going to continue to look like as he develops. But those two guys could end up taking that mantle. And if those guys are what we think they are and they play up to their potential, then yes, this is a top 10 offense hands down because I think they did enough on the offensive line to correct things. But then there's also just what like Patrick Mahomes does on a week to week, year to year basis. And that is just find ways to win games. And obviously, early on in his career, he was throwing deep bombs. He was able to just like create explosives out of nowhere because of how he can manipulate the pocket and defenders. But recently, we've seen that manipulation play more into the short game and just taking what the defense has given them. And that has worked out just fine for them. They are a team that is willing to play ball control and just methodically march down the field. And I don't see that changing. And so because of that, that's where I see this team still being really, really successful is they haven't been stopped outside of the best defense or defenses in football. And that's where it's just, I think, based on how this roster looks, how it's coached, who's the quarterback, there's no regression from there. If anything, I do see them kind of climbing into the top 10 because of some of those pass catchers that could either be taking a step or will be coming back at some point in the season.
I don't know. The Panthers had him shook in week 11 or 12 or
How
whatever
how
that
long
week
was
was.
how long was that scramble to end the game? Like he clutched up when he needed
Exactly.
to. Like that's the point at the end of the day.
Check Dane Jackson's FanDuel or Venmo with the John Mateer Oklahoma QB story. Shifting to the defense, I think my concerns are more so on this side of the ball. Last year, the perception of the defense I think is a bit skewed because they were really good at pressures because Spags designs really good pressures. They allowed the fourth fewest points per game, but in terms of efficiency metrics, they were largely middle of the pack. And they lose a guy like Turk Wharton, who was not he's not their pass rush specialist, but he played really well off of Chris Jones. He was probably their best player in the Super Bowl. And they lose Justin Reid in the secondary, replacing those guys with kind of incumbent players. I know they drafted the Tennessee D tackle, but he played like 200 snaps in college or his senior year, which is very, very low. So they're replacing guys like the guys I mentioned with Mike Pennell. They're replacing Reid with Shamari Connor, and they bring in Christian Fulton from the Chargers, who we talked about earlier. I think that they lost important pieces, but not like Chris Jones level pieces on that side of the ball. With QBs kind of playing well down the stretch, and when I say down the stretch, I mean Josh Allen, Bryce Young, and Jalen Hurts in the important games. Do you have any concern with the defense this year? Or do you think that with the capital they've invested, especially up front, because you know they've invested a lot of first round picks in that line, do you think they're going to be fine this year?
I mean, they're going to be fine. I don't think it's going to be a bad unit, but like this isn't going to be a top 10 unit that we kind of saw in 2023 and maybe
Hmm.
even parts of last year. So it's they're going to be good enough to where they force a couple stops in opportune times because of how they're coached. They're going to get a few turnovers with some of the playmakers they have on the back end. And it's just more like they do need to find another blue chip player too, especially with Chris Jones getting older. I think that's like the biggest issue is that as much as you can talk about how well the team's drafted and built, they haven't replaced necessarily stars in Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelsey, Chris Jones over the years. And it's just like that is kind of your core, and that core is fading. So, who is going to be the next one to step up to the mantle, be that elite playmaker on either side of the ball outside of Patrick Mahomes? And so, I kind of pointed towards like Rashee Rice and Xavier Worthy maybe taking that step on offense. You kind of inferred on the defensive line. George Karloftis, like he's got to step up. And I think it was a funny like training camp clip. He got gassed, took his helmet off after a rep, and Chris Jones chewed him out. Like, and that was just holding him accountable. And that's more like when guys step up to that level, it's not only that they're the best, they're pushing everybody else around them. And so that's what has me a little bit concerned, I think, about like the Chiefs moving forward. I do like this team this year, but moving forward, they need to find those stars.
Yeah, and I think Trent McDuffie on the back end makes you feel better, but
Mm-hmm.
it is that defensive line, right? Because they're losing a big pressure getter from last season in Wharton. That's my main concern. Aside from the points per game, they were like average to below average in a lot of stuff. Maybe they slip around like down to like 20th, but I think they're so well coached and disciplined that I don't think it gets far beyond that. As far as X factors go, I'm really stumped about this one because I think Xavier Worthy is probably their most talented target week one. It's like we're gonna throw the Super Bowl tape in the toilet and flush it because it was that bad. But if the game were close, and you can throw the Bills game into this too, Xavier Worthy was balling out in his last two games of the season. Unfortunately, they just got stomped on in the Super Bowl, so nobody's going to care about it. So I think if he can continue to ascend, I'm not saying he's going to replace Tyreek Hill one for one, even though their 40 times are probably comparable. But he can be the go to option if he and Mahomes are on the same page more. Mahomes missed him on quite a bit as well during the regular season down the field. So if they can build some rapport, I think he's going to be the X factor, not only of the offense, but of the entire team.
He can unlock a lot of different things. Mahomes has to get back on the same page with some of these guys with his deep ball and just being able to put a catchable pass out there for someone that can just break away from the rest of the secondary. When we talk about, I guess, like maybe guys that are a little bit of a surprise or could come on as the season goes on, the Chiefs running back room, I'm not sold with Isaiah Pacheco and Kareem Hunt, but a guy on third downs, a guy that could be very interesting when you consider how how short most of the Chiefs' pass attempts are now in this Mahomes era. Brashard Smith out of SMU, their rookie. Gotta keep an eye on. It'd be like one of your late, like last picks of the draft or a waiver wire addition. But because of that running back room, because of the injury history that both of them have, I could see him being a guy that is actually able to rack up in a PPR league receptions, yards, maybe even a couple touchdowns here and there. But yeah, that'd probably be like one of my last takes about like kind of this Chiefs team and just like fantasy outlooks and just players to keep an eye on.
And it's funny, right? Because Isaiah Pacheco, I believe, was a seventh round draft pick. He comes out of nowhere and dominates, right? Kareem Hunt was a fourth round draft pick by the Chiefs. He had like a 40-point week his very first week in fantasy football. I only remember it because the guy I was playing at the time didn't start him, and that's the reason I won that week. That's why that's always in the back of my mind. So maybe Brashard Smith is the guy to early in the season really take the reins and run away with it. I think Noah Gray as well in the tight end room. He seems like the natural Kelsey target replacement. I don't think he's as near the star power that prime Kelsey was, but he's gonna be seeing a lot more this year. He saw a lot last year. I think back to the Carolina game, he had two really early touchdowns and a lot of targets. So I think he's the next guy to take a step there as well. But yeah, I think that's gonna do it for the division, right? Getting into perfect takes. Do you have a take on your mind as I try to formulate one?
Oh, let's see about this division in particular. I've said the Chiefs will end up at least back in the AFC Championship game. I think it'd be cheap to say they win the division again. I think that's like they're favored on it. So like I'm trying to think of a take that's a little bit spicy. And I think the one I'm coming around on is only two teams make it to the playoffs from this division. I think when we talk about the AFC South next week, there's a chance for two teams there to make it. And then the division we just talked about last week in the actually no 2 weeks or no it was last week, it was a week and a half ago, 3 episodes ago. Oh gosh, it's been a long day. But the AFC North, I can see them sending two teams as well. So that's where it's just like you look at the three wild card teams. I don't necessarily see a division in the AFC sending three, even though we've seen since the 17 playoff format at least one division on either conference sending one division sending three teams. So I don't see it in the AFC. I think it's going to be an NFC thing because that's a weaker conference. I just think the AFC is so stacked right now to project another conference or another division placing three teams in playoffs. It's a lot to ask.
Well, we saw it last year. This very division sent
With the
three,
AFC
right?
West, I know. I'm just saying that
Mhm.
like to see it back to back, I feel like the Broncos or the Chargers down the stretch, one of them is going to be the odd one out because it's just like I think the Texans will win the division, but like Jaguars, are they able to with some of their new infrastructure? They have a lot of talent. Does the new juice at head coach? Are they a wild card team playing an easier schedule, able to rack up more wins than like a Chargers team? Like I'm just saying down to tiebreakers, I could see a lot of teams having 10 wins. It's just like who's the oddball out.
For sure. I think it's Kansas City and Denver, in my opinion. I think I've already done the Denver wins division in the regular season, so I'm not going to repeat that one. I think that I'm going to go with the Las Vegas Raiders are going to have a top 10 scoring offense this season. I was gonna do Genty Rookie of the Year. That seems really cheap because I'm sure he's the favorite at this point. But yeah, I'll go top 10 scoring offense for the Las Vegas Raiders. They have star weapons, albeit not a wide receiver. Geno Smith is more than capable of distributing the ball, especially at a higher level than what they had last year. And if Chip Kelly's stints in college, stints multiple because he was at UCLA, then at Ohio State last year, if his stints with creative teams with good talent can reinvigorate some of the creativity he brought when he came to the Eagles, I think we can see a lot of new stuff, or not new stuff, maybe some wrinkles that teams aren't ready for that could lead to a lot of high scoring early in the season.
I agree with that just because Chip Kelly has proven to operate both in the NFL and college. And I think him going back to college a second time and doing things differently with different teams and different players and getting a feel for what works and what doesn't. It's really cool to see like the evolution of a coach and just maturation process, because I think the big selling point on Chip Kelly when he came to the Eagles was it was fast tempo. It was fast tempo. We're going to run 70 plays in a game, and like that was kind of their thing. It was like, we're going to get lined up and we're going to go, and like, are you ready? And I'm sure we'll see some of that upbeat tempo just because that is in Chip Kelly's blood. But it's just some of the wrinkles that we saw with Ohio State, like leaning into the run game and just how that can help your pass game. Like this is a Pete Carroll team that we're talking about. Like
Hmm.
they're going to run the ball, and they are not going to stop running the ball. And that's what I think is great when you're looking for like a fantasy outlook. Like you said, Ashton Genty, want to say Rookie of the Year award, but I do like this top 10 offense because they could be electric. I think they're going to be one of the most fun offenses to watch because of all of the pieces and factors involved.
A couple months ago, so it would have been after the draft, one of the people at Two Point Conversion wrote a league pass ranking. You know what league pass is in the NBA? It's like you can watch all the games from the other teams, or you can pick one specific team to watch. They're like the league pass. It's the fun team that's probably not very good. I think the Raiders were at the top of that list that was written. So fun team. Don't think they're going to be world beaters by any means, but should put some points on the field every week. Think that's going to do it. We guarantee we'll be back with the AFC South next week. We'll try to get the team order right. Don't cut that part out.
No, we're not cutting
But
this out. Like you're
yeah, we're
you're going
not
to hear
cutting
the
it out.
mess up. Yeah, no, that's
But
great.
until then, you can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Twitter, YouTube, wherever you get your content. But yeah, we will be back next week to talk about CJ Stroud and the Jags, and even some surprises with the Colts and the Titans. But until then, keep pounding.